Thank you, Governor Chopper.
Dean Laughlin, first of all, I think it's difficult to follow such a philosophical question, and I strongly endorse the faculty resources comment that you made, President. My question is more specific. On the mapping, I'm trying to understand, is the centralization of your mapping only for the undecideds, and is this actually sent out to the majors?
Yes, no, every student is mapped, every undergraduate is mapped. So the undecided part that I was talking about is just trying to get, if you come in exploratory, there is an exploratory map that is kind of adjusted to the direction students are going. But every undergraduate student is mapped all the way through till the time they graduate.
The advising is being done at the departmental levels, or is it being done in a centralized?
Well, it's what we sort of jokingly call centralized decentralization. I hire the advisors, I train the advisors, we place them in departments, but then they work on and become part of the team in a particular department. And that reminds me, the question about cost, obviously, you know, you can play these numbers lots of ways, but it did occur to me that as we've looked at some of the investments that we've made, of course, every time you make a gain in retention, you keep those students at the university. They're continuing to put their tuition dollars into the university. And so there is a way in which successful retention efforts, maybe they don't completely pay for themselves, but they certainly don't, you're winning in terms of the value of that retention. Manoj, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. And I'm assuming the map goes along with an audit with the grades on it, right?
Well, yes, and it depends on, obviously you have to be in good academic standing, so you have to have at least a 2.0, but if there's a major that requires a specific grade point average in order to, let's say, be admitted or to be successful, then there are GPAs as well as courses on the milestones. Just to give you some idea, too, I would say in a given semester about 3,000 students are off course. So those are the students that you have those pretty intense conversations with. Sometimes it's just change your major. Sometimes it's, find let's just get you focused a little better.
Thank you, Dr. Laughlin.
You're very welcome. Thank you for this opportunity.
Next, I'd like to invite Ms. Roxanne Barnett, Senior IT Expert at the University of Florida, to discuss the UF Universal Tracking System.
Good afternoon, board and university presidents. It's an honor to be here. I'd like to start out by doing some, if I can figure out how to work this thing. There we go. Okay. We actually had a precursor to the Universal Tracking System called MAP, which is Monitoring Academic Progress Policy. It actually had criteria established by the faculty within the departments, and we monitored the students when they crossed 30, 45, and 60 hours. It was a situation where students were brought in at a university college level and monitored for those three benchmarks, and then once they actually crossed the 60-hour benchmark, they were classified into their college if they had met the criteria. And that was started in December of '92 and ran till '96 when we made the first run of universal tracking. It was at that time that we actually had each department develop an 8-semester plan and go through and identify from the faculty at each department or major what courses they felt would indicate success in the major if the student completed those courses with the particular grades or GPA that was established by the department. We monitor the students twice each fall and spring semester of their enrollment through the 5th semester, and at that time they or if they're on track and meet all the criteria, then they go on. But they are classified from day one into their major. There's no admitting to the major if they, at the junior level, if they come in as a freshman and maintain and are on track for the 5 semesters, they are automatically in the major. Each time we do the monitoring, we approximately monitor about 20,000 students, and of those 20,000 students, we have approximately 20% of those students off track at any given monitoring. Okay. I don't know if I skipped a slide or not. So must just, sorry. Okay, so the faculty and advisors, as well as the students, use an online web facility in which they can actually view their degree audit, which contains all their requirements for graduation. And then there is a separate audit that was created that reflect the critical tracking criteria that the student needs to meet at each of the individual first 5 semesters. Okay. And this is just a view of the actual online screen that the advisor uses to run a degree audit or the actual universal tracking audit. And this is the same view, but from the student perspective. And this is just a chart to show our progression of 4- and 6-year graduation rates from actually prior to mapping and then on through universal tracking. Let's see, is there anything else? So what we've gained from this is that we found that the academic advisors are a very critical component of universal tracking. When we implemented universal tracking, we actually implemented it with the current infrastructure and the current staffing. There was no additional staffing or advisors added at that time. The academic advisors play a key component in this because of the 20%, and what we found is that of the 20% that are off track, those are students who are truly in need of intervention. And so the academic advisor can sit down with them and let them know, that maybe to explore other avenues of interest. A lot of students come in as wanting to be pre-med, and they just can't handle the chemistry or calculus or whatever. And so the academic advisor then, it's their job, and they do a great job of focusing that student into a different avenue or a different area of interest.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
What is your number of professional advisors per student?
I actually do not have a number. I can kind of give you a rough estimate. In the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, out of that 20%, they have actually about half of that, so about 2,000 students each semester, and they have roughly 10 to 12 advisors that see those students.
Mm-hmm. And they're professional advisors?
Yes, they are.
Thank you, Norm.
I was being advised by Governor Brogren about something, and I was telling him no. He was trying to shortchange the time, and I said, we've decided with this committee, it probably needs more time, not less time, and so we're going to try to make sure that we get all the questions to everybody that's here. Any questions, Maury, to this presenter?
I apologize.
No apology
Governor
needed.
Tripp,
It's important that we understand
Yeah.
what's going on here.
thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Do you see other universities reaching out to you and saying, it seems like you've been in the business, you know what you're doing, could you help us?
Yes.
Are we getting that cross action?
I haven't had that much interaction with universities within the state of Florida. Although, as Dean Laughlin alluded to, is that, yes, they did come to UF, and we definitely had, many conversations with them.
That's the in-state universities?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Any other questions? Appreciate your coming here. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Kevin Bailey, UWF Vice President for Student Affairs and Chair of the SUS Council for Student Affairs, to help the committee understand the decision-making process of a smaller university for implementing a tracking system.
Thank you, Governor Tripp. I am batting cleanup. I am the thorn between two roses. I have no tech. But I also want to shift our thinking and have us think about an institution like UWF that's 45 years old. Most of us in this room are older than UWF. Not me. And a collective mindset that suggests we want to be a commuter institution and have lived that life for most of our existence. Recently, we have become more aware, if you will, and have been on a path to become a more traditional institution. Traditional by having more students live on campus, traditional by providing more robust experiences for them when they're not in class, which is what I do, and starting to pay attention to the numbers that we've been collecting for years and starting to ask the question of the why behind the what. Why are our numbers the way they are? What are the contributions and the antecedents that get us to those numbers? So I would tell you that over the last 6-8 months, myself and my colleagues at UWF have really been on a data quest to understand some of those numbers, and then using the data to inform decisions, to use that data to allocate resources, to have us begin to scratch the surface on getting at some of our retention, persistence, and graduation rates. And for all of us, that starts simply with the students we admit and what their characteristics are, what they look like, the number of remedial courses that they may bring in, their high school GPA, the number of hours they attempt, the number of hours they earn, and looking holistically. I like to call this an all-in activity. And again, we're just beginning to scratch the surface on this. And so for my colleagues in student affairs, in the residence halls, in the career center, in the counseling center, my colleagues in academic affairs, with Faculty Senate, having the conversation about mandating attendance in first-year courses, with our folks in university advancement, providing additional funds and scholarships for students to attend classes. And so again, all of us at the institution are invested in making sure that we've got the right kind of students here, that they have a good experience while they're here, that they stay, that they persist, and they ultimately graduate. So things like mapping that you heard my colleagues talk about, we're not there yet. We want to be there. We're not there yet. All of the things we're starting to scratch the surface on will not pay dividends for us for a number of years. But we are awake. We're starting to dig in the numbers, help them tell the story, and be in a better position in years to come to boost all those numbers. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions?
I have a comment. I think it'd be worth us gathering the data about what each of our universities have in terms of number of advisors per student. The trend toward professional advisors, I think, is important. It costs money, and we're going to have to find the money to do that. It's a lot cheaper to keep a student than it is to recruit a new one, and we ought to.
Jan, will you make a note of that? And thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, just a quick segue. If you go back to the work plan experience that we put together for this third time round on the work plans in Orlando, this issue of graduation rates and retention rates was really at the very heart and soul of everything else that was discussed in those plans. And so these conversations are important to know what people are doing, because when you charge universities with getting their graduation and retention rates up, it's important that you know that when they take money and put it there, what the plan is to do that, and then what the return on that investment is over time. That's how we move the needle on these things. So I commend not just these three universities, but I think you could probably have the other universities stand right there with what they're doing at their institutions. These three be just sort of good examples of what's going on to make sure that we can constantly see the needle at every university move appropriately through very good, well-organized, and systematic approaches to these issues. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't know if it's ever been done, whether it's possible, but maybe sometime we ought to request funding specifically to ask the University of Florida to package this and put it together so that we could send it out to the other universities. I know they're different in many ways, but, Jan, we ought to look at that and see when there is a great program. We've seen that it's gone down, and Florida State is using a similar model, maybe not exactly the same, but it may be difficult for the UWF to find the resources to do that. But if we were able to put the package there that you could make work on your own, since we already have the basis, and maybe we ought to look and see what would it cost UF to do that for the other universities, and then take that to the legislature and ask them to fund that specifically so that all of the universities could benefit on it. Is that something possible, Mr. Chancellor?
No, I love best practice. And again, I will go back to where I started and say, I venture to say every one of the universities has a system in place. The question, to your very good point, is, are they satisfied with the system, and what keeps them, not for lack of desire, but what keeps them from being able to take their system to the next level? Is it just pure resources? Is it not enough advisors and counselors? Is it perhaps the desire to get a new mapping system? Because this, while it sounds bureaucratic, is critical, the system itself. So at the end of the day, no, I think best practice is something that we ought to be doing more of in our system when it's appropriate.
Jan, could we have you have a conversation on that? It may be just a wild idea that doesn't work, but let's think about it.
Yeah, while we're on University of West Florida, I want to share with you on this subject some sort of troubling discussions we've been having at the university. I'm a great believer in performance-based everything. I believe in keeping score, and I want to win. And I know that we at UWF, I'll speak for our university, we take pride in excess. We have a lot of Pell students. We have 35% Pell. We have 38% first time in college. And all of these students take more work, more money, more support to give them an education. And we take great pride in reaching out to them. But if we have to move the needles, and I think we should, we are talking about being more selective, because we must be. We have to take students that will succeed and send those other students that aren't yet prepared enough to succeed without too much of an expense in our university. I don't know where we'll fall, but we are talking about that. And I know Florida State went through it, University of Florida went through it, in the evolution of their universities to the elite status where they are now, where you have to have a huge grade point average to be admitted and to enter different majors. We are talking about that. And I think that you will find that we're going to have to tighten up in order to make sure that we can pay attention to the students that need it and not take students that don't meet the profile of student success at UWF. Right. That's not the same profile of student success at USF or New College or anywhere else. But I just wanted to share with you, when we begin to talk about performance indicators and moving them where they need or where they should in the direction to go, that we look at each university not just as an individual, but as the service that we do for the state university system, because it is different for us.
Thank you. Judy?
Yes, I would echo what President Benz has just said, but I also wanted to remind you that that is the purpose, I thought, for differential tuition was to allow us to have a plan to hire these advisors and to make sure that we're hiring faculty to help with this retention and this first year. Now, I'm always, do we need more money? Of course we do in this area, but that's what differential tuition was supposed to be for the undergraduate programs at research universities as it first started out. And it's different that, we had a plan that we put together that said we're going to hire advisors and hire financial advisors because so many don't know how to use how to budget their money properly. And so, and also the faculty at this level. So please know that is what differential tuition was supposed to be.
That is the source of funds for the Florida State effort, was differential tuition.
Thank you.
We all do have different ideas.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll maybe close this out here unless I don't want to cut it off, but I'm going to throw a commendation to another committee we've got going, which is Access and Attainment. That's the entire predicate upon which they're doing their work, is to looking at how we're organized, what are the supply and demand needs that have to be produced by this system, as well as the other systems in our higher education community, and make certain at the end of the day that, like some states already have, many states, there are already universities, state colleges, and community colleges, that one of the things we look at is how we're organized as a state. Because the last thing you want to give people the impression that you're doing is putting students on the street because they're not college ready. They're not university ready,
Right.
but they're ready to go to college in many ways if they're in the right environment. And you've heard me say regularly, we've created a system in Florida where our universities are also our state colleges. It doesn't work. You can't create that broad a mix and expect universities to increase their metrics significantly when you're trying to reach everybody of such a broad strata. We've got an outstanding college system by name, and I think by function. If we better blend all of those opportunities together, I think we can meet the access needs of a growth state, but also make certain that we're organizing ourselves in a way so that student who perhaps in the future can't get into Florida State, Mr. President, or into UWF, still has a high-quality opportunity to a post-secondary education, whether it's an AA degree or, in Florida, the beginning with an AA degree and the guarantee of a transfer to a state university for baccalaureate degree purposes. But to ask people to take just everybody who technically qualifies for a university, knowing that that strata is enormous and wide, and then expect them to organize themselves to make sure they're meeting the needs of all of those students is virtually an impossible task. So I'm not trying to preempt where the Access and Attainment Committee is going, but those are the kinds of issues that we have to have the courage to talk about. And when you start talking about your own system and other systems, it gets to be a thorny thing. But at the end of the day, if a student in this state wants to go to a higher educational opportunity, needs to go, we have to have ourselves organized in a way where we're going to meet the needs of that student, not just financially so that they can do that, but academically so that they can do it and be successful and graduate at the end of the day.
Frank, you're ranking right up there with Maury. Doctor, we appreciate it. Any questions of the doctor?
Chairman, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say briefly, that's kind of what I was alluding to today when I was talking to the governor about. We have the 2+2 plan. There, a lot of the community colleges have tremendous facilities for folks that may not necessarily be ready for the university, but certainly they can get ready there, and they can go once they complete the program there. I mean, it was good enough for me. Good enough for both my offspring, and to go from there to the university. It's also it gives some people that may not necessarily be ready for the university, not necessarily academically, but they just may be adjusting. When I got out of the Army, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I know I didn't want to wear anything green anymore, but by going to TCC, they kind of brought me back into reality and got functioning and all like that, so I could move on. But I do think that a lot of times, that's what I was trying to imply to the governor about, maybe we should foster a greater collaboration with the state college system in terms of how we do that.
You know, we've had that. I served for 8 years on the state community college board. There was a mission creep those years ago for them to become, 4-year schools and whatever. Our government, the legislature, which has a big role in that, has basically played a small role in that happening, but they haven't given it, in my opinion, enough direction. Pam probably has to deal with that. Randy Hanna, who is now their executive director, who came off Judy's board and who I served with, understands it. But we're a few years away from exactly happening. What we're saying is that there will be a 4-year degree available. It'll be different than going to the community college probably, and then in every case doing the 2+2. But, it's frustrating because there's no clear path out there today. I think that's what I'm hearing out here is some frustration.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Maury, I'm sorry.
I'll be quick. Madam President, what's the percentage of your students that come into your university that either drop or don't graduate after 6 years?
I think our 6-year graduation rate is about 45-46%, about national average.
So that's 55% don't graduate?
That's right.
Do you think it's fair to them after 6 years that they can graduate and they have a $21,000 in average in debt?
No, I don't. And, of course, that's the way iPads or the national data is counted, that percentage. How many of our students that come in as freshmen that graduate somewhere, that do finish? We have 30% of our students are military-related, move in and move out. So there are a lot of conditioning factors, but the national average is 40. I mean, our average is about 44%. I don't like it. I don't like our retention rate. And in order to tighten that up, we have to have better students and I mean, come in. One of the things that I think we've been kind of searching our soul about this issue at West Florida, and we talk about the mission creep of the colleges up to the universities. I think, and I'll speak for my university, we've had mission creep downwards. We've been taking students who should go to the college, I've been just thinking of the students right now that are failing courses, that are freshmen, and tapping them on the shoulder somehow and say, I think you ought to go across town to Pensacola State. I know that's just terribly illegal and probably unethical, but I think somebody should tell them that you're just not ready yet. Just go across the street or go across town. And I think we're just going to pay a lot, and we need to, because you're right, Governor Tripp, we need to have the right students in the right institution for them. And they exist. I think we need separation of our universities from the colleges, at least we do. And we need to have it really on academic quality and standards, because there is a difference between a college and a university, but we haven't articulated it well. I think sometimes our legislators feel that universities are just overpriced colleges. That's not true, but I'm afraid that that is the perception that's out there, and we need to do something to make that separation much more visible, and it should rest on academic quality.
Absolutely. Any other comments? You bring out the best in us.
It's my job, thank you.
Appreciate it.
He does.
My job.
I got to tell you what, he keeps me on my toes. He's not letting me get away with anything. Next, I want to call on Dr. John Rogers to present the results of a system survey that provides a status report on the academic tracking systems that are in place or are being planned at the state universities.
Thank you, Governor
Thank you,
Tripp.
John.
I'm going to yield my time back to the chair and just point the members to their meeting materials that has the summary chart.
Give us just a little bit. We may not get, just give us quickly.
Okay.
We've only got
just a
so
minute
many
or two.
universities. How many have, don't have? Where are we generally?
All the undergraduate deans surveyed back to us the status of their academic tracking systems, degree audit systems. All the universities are at play here. They all get it. They all are devoting resources to it. Of course, FSU, UF are more sophisticated, been around longer. But planning, there's system-wide planning at each campus on upgrading their systems at basically every university. So, as I said, they're all engaged. They all want to upgrade the system. They all see the relationship to retention and graduation rates.
When they're starting to do it, is there a platform like Florida that they could use, or do they have to go out, find a new software package, or do they have to, bring it on? How is that happening?
Well, I think it's a distinctive university process of planning. They're looking at, as Dr. Bailey said, they're looking at their campus curriculum. They're looking at their programs that they deliver, the kinds of students that are coming into their campus, and that helps determine the type of system that really will be most effective. So I think it's a kind of an individual campus decision.
Any questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. So, to conclude, I encourage committee members to let me or staff know of any particular student retention issues that they would like to learn more about, and we'll schedule time on a future committee agenda. I think this is the committee where we need to keep the focus on all the metrics that we keep talking about. Strategic planning is good for looking out in the future, but this committee needs to be focused closer in on how we're achieving the board's long-range planning and what we need to do moving back and forth. So that's going to be something we're going to try and do. Next up, item 4 on the agenda is the Student Affairs Update, and I'll first call upon Governor Whatley to provide us with an update on issues of interest to the Florida Student Association.
Thank you, Chair. Governors, presidents, and anyone else in attendance, I have a very brief, report. The Florida Student Association, we met over the weekend, so I was actually just here this past Saturday, and we looked over the report on the Task Force on Higher Education chaired by Dr. Brill, and talked about some of the implications of that report, as well as the report by the Facilities Task Force, and sort of what we thought, which will be in further discussion tomorrow. Also, we have placed our dates for our rally in Tallahassee as April 2nd and 3rd, and also our DC fly-in, which will be lobbying national issues on the 28th and the 30th of January. Our AIM Hire initiative, which a lot of you have heard about, is coming along at this point. We're coordinating our marketing schemes. We're drafting packets to send out to elected officials and state leaders, essentially asking them to pledge to their support to kind of being in line or focusing on higher education, making it a focus. And in the package, we're providing them with the information that we've been collecting, the economic impact of our institutions, how the institutions affect the communities that they're in, as well as the workforce. And under this year is the first year that the Florida Student Association has not had dues, and so we've had participation from all institutions this year. And so what we're doing is we are establishing a board of advisors, and this was just approved at our last meeting. So we'll be reaching out to state leaders to form a board that is going to help with our continuity as we actively and pretty frequently transition and change over leadership, and also look for external funding for the organization. So that's something that we're working on, and we'll be putting together packets to send out to leaders across the state over the break, or after the break.
So since the amendment was not approved, you have everybody in the organization now?
This year we did, even before, but yes, still we do have everyone in.
I would like to ask you to reach out to each university again and see if you can get their commitment to be part of this. The people have spoken, and I don't think we need to go a different direction. If you find that you can't get the cooperation of making this everybody in, I would hope you would then reach out to the president of the university, report back to us, reach out to the president, ask their assistance in trying to deal with what are the issues that need to be overcome so that everybody can be comfortable. And if you can't get the presidents to do it, I would hope that this committee, myself as chair or whoever might be chair in the future, would then help to mediate to try and put this to an end once and for all. It's important for the students at every university have somebody in place who has an opportunity to sit on this board. And we don't want any university to deny that because of some political reasons or otherwise to their students.
And I agree with you, and this year has actually been a very pleasant year, and obviously my colleagues and I have discussed these matters very heavily and on a very frequent basis, and we've established a point to, at least in my observations, where everyone is participating. I get constant feedback from all my colleagues as far as what's going on in the institutions and statewide. So it's been a great year, and we're looking to make sure that whatever we establish this year continues. So,
Mr. Chairman, may I comment?
Yes.
There is only one reason why the Florida State students did not participate, and in not having dues, that problem disappeared. Basically, theirs was a matter of some principle. Everybody serves as a Board of Governor representing, the breadth of the system or representing the faculty. They do so without paying dues. Only students are required to pay dues in order to have membership, a chance to participate on this board. And if there are not dues associated with the student organization, then the objection of my students completely disappears. And of course, our students, especially living in Tallahassee, self-support things like lobbying effort.
Mr. Chairman.
And so they would be paying for it twice, essentially. This was another reason. So quite frankly, the fact that the student organization has opened its arms and said we'd rather have membership than have that issue in the way, this is a great development and makes that amendment unnecessary.
Thank you. Ava.
President Barron, is it that, because I know that your student association has hired its own lobbyists, are the issues for the student body at FSU so different from the other issues that other students have that they find it necessary to have a separate lobbyist?
I believe the University of Florida also student organization has that. And, you know, given the number of students that we have that are deeply involved in political science and other areas, they see this partly as also civic duty. So the issue really was, should students have to use their funds to pay to be on this board? Because nobody else does. That really, they were dealing with a matter of principle. I suspect, because I talked to them and I said, you know, look, it's not that much money. And they said, look, it's a matter of principle. Why should students be the faculty don't have to pay a dues in order to be represented on this board. So it was a matter of principle with them. So, and I have to say that I think they had a point, but it's their decision anyway, whether they wish to be represented or not. And I think the problem's solved.
I was going to say, Governor Parker, to your comment, we also at the University of Central Florida also have a lobbying firm on retainer, specifically to deal with issues very, I guess, specific to our institution. So I can acknowledge that fact. And the reason, actually, Ruben, the student body president at FSU, was actually here over the weekend as well and participating, as he's been all year. This is the first year that we haven't had dues associated with the organization membership, and that's why, like I said, we're establishing a board of advisors to look for external funding to be able to put on the same type of lobbying initiatives that we've been able to do traditionally in the past as well. So I think it did solve the problem.
I'm glad you're working on it. I find it very interesting that the Board of Governors is not allowed to have a lobbyist, and hire a lobbyist, but the student organizations can spend money to hire lobbyists. Very, very interesting. Sometime, maybe in some other committee, we should have a conversation about that. Any other questions? Okay, let me go on here. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Bailey, Chair of the SUS Council for Student Affairs, to provide an update. And the committee is particularly interested in the two anti-hazing conferences held in September that were co-sponsored by the council.
Thank you again, Governor Tripp. The committee members will have a two-page report or summary of the two summits in your materials. To refresh the group's memory, these summits were held in conjunction with National Anti-Hazing Awareness Week, which was September 23 through 27. For both summits, one hosted by the University of Florida, the other co-hosted by FAU and FIU at FAU. There were a total of 155 participants at this inaugural anti-hazing summits. Most of the participants were people from student affairs across the various institutions. Also had general counsel, people from athletics, a number of undergraduate, graduate students, a couple of faculty members, as well as someone from general counsel's office. I also want to inform everyone that we had a couple of outsiders, folks from outside of the state who heard about the summit and came down, folks from Georgia, from Michigan. I think those are the only two outside entities. So in terms of the summits itself, everyone agrees they were an opportunity for dialogue with colleagues that they wouldn't normally have, an opportunity to hear from one speaker who went to both summits, who is a nationally renowned speaker on anti-hazing issues, a gentleman named Dave Westall. And so the recommendations from both summits, you have these in your packet, but I would just highlight two. One of those is to move the timing of the summit outside of Anti-Hazing Week, because what institutions found, they were doing double duty. They had their own campus initiatives, plus trying to get people to come to one of two centralized locations. The second thing revolves around the creation of a interdisciplinary, if you will, anti-hazing team on campuses. And so the conversation came up. One of the things that gets dicey related to hazing is this idea of scavenger hunts. Okay? And so in a fraternity and sorority community, a scavenger hunt may be a no-no. But over in recreation or over in ROTC, they're doing them all day, every day. And so on our own campuses, depending upon who you talk to, something is permissible with one group and not with another group. So coming together collectively as an institution to talk about some of those definitions and some of those permissible behaviors for bonding people to an organization. We will continue to work on this as a system. I would remind the committee that we did put together the anti-hazing matrix that we share with this board. Chair Ehas before me did that with the group, and it is our commitment to annually update that document, and as best practices emerge, adopt them within the SUS. With that, this concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions? We're all learning that the worst thing that can happen to a university president is to have a failure in a hazing incident that it involves a death. It'll take so much of your time that you'll never think about anything else for quite a period of time. So I think we're recognizing that while there are high-profile types of hazing that we see, as you said, there's much of it ongoing, and people don't think about it. And it's the beginning of something that nobody thought would happen that eventually turns to somebody getting hurt. And I think we're never going to be able to say 100% that every institution is purely clean. But I think what we can do is see the markers of problems that are starting, and we can nip it in the bud, hopefully, before it rises to a level that causes great damage to a student.
Agreed.
So you're going to work on this. We appreciate it. This will be an ongoing thing that we're going to report on and keep our attention on.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, item 5 on the agenda is an update on FSU's Bachelor of Fine Arts in Animation and Digital Arts located in West Palm Beach. Dr. Frank Patterson, Dean of the College of Motion Pictures, will provide a brief update for the committee on the current status of the program as well as planning for this coming year. Board staff have sent some questions to Florida State, and I'm assuming that he will answer those. I would just like to state that I did have a personal phone call with Dr. Barron. He and I discussed this, and so if any of the board members have any question about it, if something progresses on this, Dr. Barron has assured me that it would come back to this board for our consideration, so that those answers don't, he's answered that question if you have an issue with it.
Thank you,
Sir,
Governor
thank
Tripp.
you.
Thank you, Governor Tripp, and good afternoon. We are, with our program, our BFA in Animation and Digital Arts, are a bit in a holding pattern right now because of the court proceedings that are going on associated with it. We're in a place where we have to continue as we planned on operating, but not do anything different. We can't plan for the future until the court completes its procedures with the digital domain bankruptcy. So we haven't really been doing anything. Our students continue to go to classes. We expect that these proceedings will be completed in the first week of December. And then I've been working with Provost Stokes and President Barron to plan an assessment process that we will undertake internally to determine what the best path forward is for that program. And then I know we plan to report back to this board in January.
Okay. Any questions?
The only question
I have a question.
I assume,
Yeah. Well, let me start.
I'm sorry.
Let me start with the chairman, and then we'll move to Pat, and then I think Maury had a.
No, I had no question.
So you won't be admitting any new students to this program until you finish that assessment process?
Our admission process begins in February. February, March is when we begin admitting students. So we are conscious of that and are planning accordingly.
Right.
And it's part of the reasons why mid-January timeframe we think will have, by necessity, have to have a fully developed plan, and we also anticipate based on filings that the bankruptcy proceedings will be over. Now, I actually said prior to this that I thought it was going to be over a couple of weeks ago, and it has been deferred until December. So we continue to operate at the status quo until that is set and done, and then we'll work hard to operate in the very best interests of our students and the system. And there have been some things that have been required, most notably the elements of the program that would have been taught within the Digital Domain Institute. That's something we have to pick up because we have a commitment to our students. This is a program for which the College of Motion Pictures, 97% of the students actually are employed by the motion picture industry. It's a remarkably good program. Our faculty have full feature films, more than 400 to their credit. Our students get Oscars, our students get Emmys. It's an internationally recognized program, and we're not going to jeopardize our quality and reputation in any way, shape, or form. So we're going to make sure that those students get the courses that they need. So that's been the primary focus while we're sitting in this holding pattern.
I do know that you have a great program. I mean, we visited part of it when we were last up your part of the woods, and I understand it was very exciting to hear that the county and the city and people in this industry wanted to become part of you. That was a given. You have great faculty. But I have two questions, or three. First of all, I want to know why you moved down, other than it was an exciting proposal to be offered to you by the city, the industry, etc., why you were down in an area where at FAU they also have a good program. That was the first question. For me, I feel a little uncomfortable about that. Even though it sounded great, I'm sort of disappointed that they didn't go to FAU or something, at least to make an offer to them, because they too have a good program. That's the first thing.
So just, can I answer that question first?
Okay.
Okay. So there are many important distinctions for the programs, and I'll let Dean Patterson describe it. But the program that is at FSU, which is a good program, and those students will go out and get jobs, is a BA. This is a Bachelor of Fine Arts. The requirements are very different. And the other thing
And
is
to say the program at FAU.
the
You said at
FAU
FSU.
program and the Florida State program are very different. A BFA and a BA.
Right.
Good thing for jobs, a lot of opportunity there for students. Very different program from one in which literally the entire population of students is working in the film industry. And it's a Bachelor of Fine Arts. So the requirements are different, the approach is different, the faculty credentials are very different.
And the organization that you were working with, it's my understanding, they place students in Orlando. They place students out of state for many jobs. They're out in California, and they're in New York. I don't know what exactly they had promised, this bankrupt company had promised you as to whether these students were going to get positions in the film industry in Florida, but I think it's a great idea, but I don't really know that. But since they are now in the period of bankruptcy, what is going to happen with this program for these particular students in the event they'll finish out the year, and then what happens after that?
Okay, so there's two things. First of all, we're legally silent on what the program is going, how the program is going to evolve. Second, SACS, we're an accredited institution, and SACS requires a teach out of a minimum of 2 years. And you have no choice. And this is an institution, Florida State, that's about to go through its accreditation. We're working hard on it right now. We've already set the schedule for when SACS is coming to visit. We're not allowed to have federal financial aid, that's Pell Grant, or federal grants in concentrate. grants and contracts without accreditation. So no matter what, those students will get everything they need, and they will be successful, and my bet is that the industry will gobble them right up.
I hope so, I think so, but supposing we have to linger and linger and linger while this court proceeding takes place for the second year, or
We believe the
does
court
FAU,
proceedings...
are they offering you at least a classroom or two with your professors?
It's
to
amazing
finish
how
it
many
out?
people would like to, who have suggested that they can give us free space
Okay.
for the program. So but again, everything is operating on the status quo, okay?
I
Until the
know, but-
bankruptcy proceedings are finished, this is the way it is. We believe that the hearing that will settle the bankruptcy, based on the motions, will be December 4th. It's not that far away.
So that industry might be gone and somebody else coming in to pick up where you were.
I don't know what may emerge with the industries, but I just know that we are going to do, we have one simple statement. We're going to do what's best in the interest of our students. We're not going to jeopardize our SACS accreditation, and we're not going to jeopardize anything through the courts. We believe that by your meeting, which I think is January 16th or something like that, we will know exactly what we think is the appropriate thing to do, and we'll come here and present
Okay.
to you what we think is best for our students.
Okay.
And that's as far as I can go.
Okay, thank you. You know, this points out a very interesting thing. We talked earlier in the meeting, not necessarily this committee, about the wonderful thing about public and private enterprises getting together. You know, that when it works, it's wonderful, and when it doesn't work, you find an institution sitting in a bankruptcy court with a private company, and they see you the same. You don't get anything special, and so that's what they're facing. You know, I'm satisfied that what you've told this committee, that once you work through this problem, which is a big problem that you got to deal with, that you'll come back to us, and we'll have an open discussion about what is the best way to go forward with this, however it works out. Are you satisfied with that, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Eddie, did you have anything more?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your coming here. I think that is it. We've had a good, long meeting. Appreciate everybody's attention. If I could have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.